You sit down at the table. The meal was balanced, nothing crazy. 40 minutes later, your eyelids get heavy. Your brain fogs over. You swear you are not going to reach for something sweet, but by 3 in the afternoon, your hand is already inside the snack drawer. The guilt follows right after. Now tell me, how many times did that happen today? That was my life 47 days ago. I had tried everything. Diet plans that felt like punishment, supplements that promised to kill cravings, but left me jittery, and blood tests that my doctor said were normal. Normal. Yet nothing about how I felt was normal. So I decided to test something I honestly thought would be another expensive disappointment. But what I found out made me question everything I thought I knew about sugar, energy, and why our bodies sometimes stop listening to us. This is not another review that just reads you the label. What I discovered over the past few weeks forced me to look at metabolic health from a completely different angle. And in this video, I am going to walk you through every single detail, including the mistakes I made that almost ruined the results. Stick with me until the end, because there is one thing that nobody talks about, and it might be the exact reason why nothing has worked for you so far. The metabolic silence. Why your body isn't listening to you. Let's start with a question. Have you ever shouted at someone who couldn't hear you? You raise your voice, you repeat yourself, and eventually you just give up. That is exactly what is happening inside your metabolism. Your body has been screaming for balance. It sends hunger signals. It sends fatigue signals. It sends cravings that feel like emergencies. But somewhere along the way, the connection got broken. The message is being sent, but the receiver is not picking it up. That is what I call metabolic silence. Most people think the problem is sugar. They think they eat too much of it, or they lack willpower, or they just need to find the right diet. But after years of chasing those theories, I realized something different. The problem was never the sugar itself. The problem was that my body had stopped communicating with itself. The hormones responsible for telling me when I was full, when I had enough energy, and when I actually needed fuel were all out of sync. Leptin, the hormone that says stop eating, was barely whispering. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, was screaming at random hours. And cortisol, the stress hormone, was running the show behind the scenes. When I first heard about Sugar Defender, I assumed it was another appetite suppressant. I thought it would just block hunger or make me feel full. But that is not what this formula does. What caught my attention was the way it is built. Instead of trying to silence the symptoms, it works on the communication system itself. The ingredients, things like Eleuthero root, Maca root, and African mango, are not there to trick your brain into eating less. They're there to help restore the signals that got drowned out. I spent the first week just paying attention. I stopped looking for dramatic changes and started listening to my body the way I used to before all the noise. And what I noticed was subtle but important. The urgent hunger that usually hit me mid-morning started to feel less like an alarm and more like a gentle nudge. The post-lunch crash did not disappear overnight, but the intensity faded. It was as if someone had turned down the volume on the chaos, and suddenly I could hear what my body had been trying to tell me all along. This is the part that most reviews skip. They want to tell you about weight loss or blood sugar numbers. But those are just the final outcomes. What has to happen first is the repair of the signal. Without that, any diet or supplement is just another voice shouting into a broken receiver. Sugar Defender does not promise to silence your appetite. It promises to restore the conversation. And when the conversation starts working again, the cravings, the energy crashes, and the constant urge to snack stop being battles you have to fight. But here is what nobody told me. Restoring that communication takes patience. And there is one hidden trap that can ruin everything before it even starts. It has to do with something invisible that your regular blood work completely misses. That is exactly what I uncovered next, and it might explain why you have been feeling off even when your doctor says everything is fine. The invisible spike trap, what routine tests don't show. You know what frustrates me the most about the past few years? Every time I went to the doctor, I got the same reassurance. Your fasting glucose is fine. Your numbers are within range. Nothing to worry about. And I would walk out of that office feeling like I was making everything up in my head. Because if my blood work was normal, then why did I feel like my energy was being hijacked every single day? Why did I crash after meals that were supposedly healthy? Why did my body behave like something was deeply wrong while the lab results said otherwise? Here's what I learned. The standard test, the one where you fast for 12 hours and then get your blood drawn, is measuring your glucose at a single moment. A moment when your body is at rest, when it has not been challenged, when it has had hours to stabilize. But what happens in the hours after you eat? That is a completely different story, and that story was hidden from me for years. When I started using Sugar Defender, I decided to do something I had never done before. I stopped relying on the doctor's snapshot and started tracking what happened after meals. Not with expensive equipment. I simply paid attention to how I felt after specific foods, and I used a basic glucose meter that anyone can buy without a prescription. What I found shocked me. There were meals that I thought were harmless. A bowl of oatmeal with fruit, a brown rice bowl with vegetables, that sent my glucose spiking higher than a slice of cake would have. And then, hours later, the crash would come. The fatigue, the irritability, the desperate need for sugar to feel normal again. That crash was not a lack of willpower. It was my body reacting to a spike that no one was measuring. The routine test gave me a false sense of security. They told me I was fine while my metabolism was actually riding a roller coaster every single day. And here is where Sugar Defender changed the game for me. It did not just help with the baseline numbers. It started smoothing out those post-meal spikes. I noticed it within the first 2 weeks. A meal that normally would have left me foggy and craving sugar within an hour suddenly felt neutral. I would eat, I would feel satisfied, and then I would go about my day without the invisible crash lurking in the background. This is the mechanism that most people miss. The supplement contains ingredients like Chromium and Gymnema Sylvestre, which are known to support the way your cells respond to glucose after you eat. Chromium helps improve insulin sensitivity at the cellular level, meaning your cells actually get the message to take in glucose instead of leaving it floating in your bloodstream. Gymnema Sylvestre has been studied for its ability to reduce the absorption of sugar in the intestines and even curb the taste of sweetness, which directly impacts those post-meal spikes. Together, they act like a buffer against the hidden surges that your routine blood work will never catch. I kept testing. I ate the same meals with and without the support of the formula. The difference was undeniable. The spikes were still there, but they were smaller, shorter, and the crashes became almost non-existent. For the first time, I understood why I had been fighting my body for so long. I was fighting invisible enemies. And the moment I started addressing those hidden spikes, everything else began to fall into place. But there is another layer to this that I was not prepared for. Because once the physical spikes started to calm down, I realized there was a whole different battle happening in my brain. A battle that had nothing to do with glucose numbers and everything to do with reward, pleasure, and the way I had trained myself to crave sugar as comfort. That is where this story gets even more interesting, and it is something almost no supplement review dares to touch. The dopamine game, when sugar becomes emotional reward. Let me take you somewhere most reviews never go, inside your brain. Because while I was busy chasing glucose numbers and meal timing, something else was happening that I completely overlooked. Every time I reached for sugar, I was not just feeding my body. I was feeding a reward system that had been hijacked. And that system, the dopamine pathway, does not care about your diet plan. It does not care about your blood work. It only cares about one thing, the next hit. Think about this for a moment. When you feel stressed, what do you reach for? When you finish a long day, what feels like a reward? When you are bored, anxious, or even celebrating, sugar is almost always there. And that is not a coincidence. Your brain learns that sugar triggers a release of dopamine, the chemical that makes you feel pleasure, relief, and satisfaction. Over time, it stops being about taste. It becomes about the expectation of that relief. You are not craving cookies. You are craving the moment of calm that your brain has associated with cookies. And the more unstable your glucose is, the more intense those cravings become. It is a loop that feeds itself. Low energy leads to craving. Craving leads to sugar. Sugar leads to spike. Spike leads to crash. Crash leads to low energy, and the cycle repeats. What I discovered with Sugar Defender is that this formula does something most appetite suppressants completely ignore. It does not just help stabilize your glucose. It helps break the emotional wiring behind the craving. The ingredients like Maca root and Eleuthero root are adaptogens, which means they help your body handle stress more effectively. And when stress is managed, the urge to seek dopamine through sugar naturally decreases. I noticed this around the 3rd week. I was sitting at my desk, it was mid-afternoon, and I realized I had not thought about sweets once. That was unusual for me. Normally, by that time, I would have already negotiated with myself about having just one piece of something. But the internal negotiation was quiet. Not because I was using willpower, but because the urge itself had faded. Gymnema Sylvestre played a role here too. This ingredient has a unique property. It can temporarily block the taste receptors for sweetness. When you take it consistently, your brain starts to recalibrate what it considers rewarding. The intense sweetness that used to light up your dopamine pathway starts to feel less compelling. You do not lose the ability to enjoy food, but you lose the compulsive edge that used to drive you towards sugar like a magnet. I started paying attention to my emotional state when cravings used to hit. Before, I would feel a wave of stress or boredom and my hand would automatically move towards something sweet. After a few weeks on the formula, I noticed that the wave still came, but the automatic response did not. There was a gap, a moment of space where I could actually choose instead of react. And that gap, that space, is where real change happens. Because when you are no longer at the mercy of your dopamine loops, you stop fighting your cravings and start understanding them. This is the part that no label will tell you. Sugar Defender does not claim to rewire your brain, but when your body is stable and your stress response is supported, the brain naturally follows. The cravings do not disappear overnight, but they lose their urgency. They stop feeling like emergencies. And when that happens, you finally get to decide what you eat instead of feeling like something else is deciding for you. Now, after seeing these changes in the first few weeks, I assumed I had seen the full picture. I thought the first month was the main event, but what happened between day 30 and day 60 caught me completely off guard. It was a second wave of results that most people never talk about because they stop too soon, and it changed how I think about long-term metabolic support entirely. The second wave effect. What happens after the first month? If I had stopped this experiment after 30 days, I would have told you a decent story. I would have said Sugar Defender helped smooth out my glucose spikes, took the edge off my cravings, and gave me a sense of control I had not felt in years. And that would have been true, but it would have been incomplete, because what happened between day 30 and day 60 was something I did not expect, and it completely shifted the way I think about metabolic support. Most reviews you see online are based on the first bottle. People take something for a few weeks, they feel a difference, and they share their experience. I get it. That is the natural cycle of testing a product. But here's what I learned. The first month is the preparation phase. Your body is waking up. The signals are being restored, the spikes are being tamed, and the dopamine loops are loosening. That is all real. But the second month is where the real transformation starts. I call it the second wave effect. Around week 5, I noticed something subtle. My digestion felt different. The bloating I had accepted as normal, the heaviness after meals I thought was just part of getting older, started to ease. I did not change my diet. I was eating the same foods, but my gut was responding differently. That is when I started looking into how metabolic health and gut bacteria are connected. When your glucose is constantly spiking, it feeds certain bacteria that thrive on sugar. Those bacteria then send signals to your brain to eat more sugar. It is a feedback loop that happens below your conscious awareness. As the spikes became less frequent, the bacterial environment in my gut began to shift. I was not feeding the sugar lovers as much, and the balance started to tip. The ingredients in Sugar Defender that support this are not just the ones you hear about in ads. African mango extract, for example, has been studied for its effects on gut health and lipid metabolism. It is not just about appetite. It is about the environment where your food gets processed. Chromium and Gymnema also play a role here because they influence how your body handles carbohydrates, which directly impacts what kind of fuel is available for your gut bacteria. Over time, the ecosystem shifts, and that shift creates a second layer of stability. The other thing that showed up in the second month was energy consistency. In the first month, I had more energy, but it was still a little unpredictable. Some days were great. Some days I still felt the afternoon drag. By week 7, the drag was gone. Not because I was doing something different, but because my body had finally stopped cycling between highs and lows. My adrenal response had calmed down. The cortisol spikes that used to hit in the late afternoon, the ones that made me reach for sugar just to keep going, had faded. Adaptogens like Eleuthero root take time to build up in your system. They are not instant. They work by supporting your stress response over weeks, not hours. And by the second month, that support had fully integrated. What surprised me most was how effortless it felt. In the first month, I was paying close attention, tracking meals, watching for spikes. By the second month, I was just living. I was not thinking about the supplement all day. I was not analyzing every craving. The changes had moved from something I had to work at to something that simply was. That is the difference between treating a symptom and restoring a system. When you restore the system starts running on its own. But there was a mistake I made during this process that I have to tell you about. It had to do with timing, specifically with what I was drinking alongside the supplement, and it nearly cost me the entire second wave. I only caught it because I was paying attention, but I know most people would not notice until it was too late. That mistake is something you need to hear before you make the same one. The geography of absorption. Why taking it with coffee or tea kills the effect. I'm going to tell you something that cost me nearly 3 weeks of progress. And if you are someone who starts every morning with a hot cup of coffee or tea, you need to listen carefully because this is the kind of detail that never makes it into the product description. About halfway through my second month, I hit a plateau. The second wave I was describing, the digestive shift, the steady energy, it just stopped progressing. I was taking the supplement every day, same dose, same routine, but the improvement stalled. I could not figure out what changed. And then I realized it was not about what I was eating. It was about what I was drinking with it. Every morning, I would take my first dose of Sugar Defender alongside my morning coffee. It felt natural. Coffee is part of my routine, so I just combined them. What I did not know is that coffee, black tea, green tea, and even some herbal teas contain compounds called tannins. Tannins bind to certain minerals and plant compounds in the digestive tract, making them much harder for your body to absorb. And several of the key ingredients in this formula, including Chromium, Eleuthero root, and Maca root, are particularly vulnerable to that binding effect. I was effectively reducing the absorption of the very ingredients I was counting on. I tested this by accident. One day I was traveling, and I took my morning dose with just water because I did not have access to coffee right away. That afternoon, I noticed a difference. The energy felt sharper. The craving control felt stronger. It was subtle, but it was there. So I decided to run a controlled experiment. For 1 week, I took this supplement at least 90 minutes before my first coffee. For the next week, I went back to taking them together. The difference was not subtle anymore. When I separated them, everything improved. The glucose spikes were smaller, the mid-morning hunger was quieter, and the second wave effects came back. When I took them together, I felt like I was back in the first month, seeing results but nothing like the full potential. I reached out to a nutritionist friend to confirm what I was seeing. She explained that this is not just about tannins. Caffeine itself can stimulate cortisol release, and when you combine that with a formula designed to balance your stress response, you are essentially working against yourself. The adaptogens in Sugar Defender, like Eleuthero root, are trying to modulate your adrenal function. Caffeine, especially in the morning when cortisol is already naturally high, pushes in the opposite direction. The two forces cancel each other out to some degree. The same applies to tea. Black tea is high in tannins. Green tea has tannins as well. Even some herbal teas like hibiscus and rosehip can interfere with mineral absorption. The safest window is to take the supplement with water on an empty stomach if possible, and wait at least an hour before having your coffee or tea. If you prefer to take it with food, that works too, as long as the food is not accompanied by those beverages. I also learned that calcium-rich foods can interfere with absorption of chromium specifically. So taking the supplement with a glass of milk or a yogurt parfait is not ideal either. Water is your safest bet, and once I locked that in, the second wave I had been waiting for came back within days. The plateau broke. The digestive balance improved. The steady energy returned. All because I changed one simple thing about my morning routine. This is the kind of detail that makes or breaks results. You can have the best formula in the world, but if your body cannot absorb it properly, you are wasting your money. And here is what else I discovered about absorption that nobody talks about. There is a whole hidden layer of inflammation that shows up when your glucose is unstable, and that inflammation acts like a roadblock for everything, including how well your body uses any supplement you take. That connection was the next piece I uncovered, and it changed how I look at metabolic health entirely. The inflammation you don't see, subclinical markers, and Sugar Defender. There is a kind of inflammation that does not show up as swelling or redness. You cannot see it in the mirror. Your doctor will not mention it unless you ask for very specific tests. And yet it runs beneath the surface of your metabolism like a low-grade fire, slowly draining your energy, dulling your focus, and making every system in your body work harder than it needs to. I did not know this fire was burning inside me until I started looking at the connection between my glucose swings and the way my body felt beyond digestion. In the first month of using Sugar Defender, I was focused on the obvious things: energy, cravings, spikes. But somewhere around week 6, I noticed something I had not been looking for. The stiffness in my knees that I had written off as normal aging started to ease. The random headaches that used to show up 2 or 3 times a week became rare. My sleep, which I thought was fine, deepened. I was waking up feeling rested instead of just less tired. These changes did not fit neatly into the glucose control story, so I started digging. What I found is that chronic glucose instability, the invisible spikes I talked about earlier, triggers a cascade of inflammatory responses in the body. Every time your glucose surges and then crashes, your body releases stress signals. Those signals, over time, keep your immune system in a state of low-grade alert. You are not sick enough to notice anything acute, but you are inflamed enough that your joints ache, your brain feels foggy, and your sleep never fully restores you. It is a subclinical fire, meaning it exists below the threshold of what most routine tests are designed to catch. Sugar Defender contains ingredients that address this from multiple angles. One of them is Chromium, which helps improve insulin sensitivity. When insulin is working properly, your cells are not constantly being bombarded with high glucose, and that reduces the inflammatory signals that come from cellular stress. Another is Gymnema Sylvestre, which not only helps with sugar absorption, but also contains compounds that have been studied for their anti-inflammatory properties. African mango extract has been shown in research to support healthy inflammatory markers as well. And the adaptogens, Eleuthero root and Maca root, help regulate cortisol, which is one of the primary drivers of systemic inflammation when it stays elevated. I started paying attention to markers I could feel. My morning stiffness, which used to take 20 minutes to shake off, was gone within 10 minutes. My skin, which would flare up with small patches of redness after high-carb meals, stayed calm. And the most surprising one was my recovery after physical activity. I am not an athlete, but even a long walk used to leave me feeling achy the next day. That stopped. I could move my body without paying for it the next morning. These were not changes I was expecting, but they were undeniable. What clicked for me is that metabolic health and inflammation are two sides of the same coin. You cannot fix one without addressing the other. And most approaches to blood sugar focus only on the numbers while ignoring the inflammatory fire that the numbers feed. Sugar Defender, because of its combination of insulin sensitizers, adaptogens, and plant extracts, works on both at the same time. That is why the benefits in the second month felt so different. My body was not just stabilizing glucose. It was finally cooling down the fire that had been burning quietly for years. Now, after seeing these results, I had a moment of temptation. I thought, if a normal dose is working this well, maybe a bigger dose would work even faster. I almost made a mistake that would have undone everything. And what I learned about the danger of taking more than the recommended amount is something everyone needs to hear before they try to shortcut their way to better results. The danger of the Instagrammable dose, why more is not better. I am going to admit something that might make you uncomfortable. Around week 7, I got greedy. I was seeing results. The energy was steady, the cravings were quiet, the inflammation was cooling down. And in that moment of excitement, a thought crept into my head. If one dose is doing all this, what would 2 doses do? Would I feel twice as good? Would the results accelerate? I had seen people on social media talking about doubling up on supplements for faster results. It looked bold. It looked like they had unlocked some secret. So I tried it. For 3 days, I took double the recommended amount. And what happened was the exact opposite of what I expected. My energy became erratic. The afternoon crash came back. My sleep, which had been so deep and restorative, became restless. I felt jittery, not energized. I felt irritable, not calm. I was getting more of the formula, but less of the results. That is when I learned a hard lesson about how the body actually responds to supplementation. There is a biological mechanism called downregulation. When you introduce a compound that supports a specific pathway, your body adapts to that presence. It adjusts its own production and sensitivity based on what it receives. If you give it the right amount, the system stabilizes. If you give it too much, your body responds by turning down its own receptors. It essentially says, we are getting plenty of support, we do not need to work as hard. The result is that excess can make you less responsive to the formula over time. You are not speeding up progress. You are building tolerance. Sugar Defender is designed with specific doses of each ingredient for a reason. Chromium, for example, works within a narrow window. Too little, and you do not get the insulin sensitizing effect. Too much, and you can actually interfere with other mineral balances in the body. Gymnema Sylvestre, in high doses, can lower blood sugar too dramatically, leading to the very crashes you are trying to avoid. Adaptogens like Eleuthero root follow a U-shaped response curve, meaning a moderate dose is effective, but a high dose can overstimulate the adrenal system and create the opposite of the calming effect you want. When I went back to the standard dose, everything returned to normal within a few days. The sleep came back. The steady energy returned. The cravings stayed quiet. What I realized is that more is not better. Consistent is better. The formula is not something you fight harder to win faster. It is something you support with patience. The results do not come from overwhelming your system. They come from giving your system exactly what it needs so it can do its own work. I see people online showing off their stacks of supplements, taking double doses, acting like intensity equals results. But biology does not work that way. You cannot force your metabolism to heal faster by throwing more at it. You can only create the conditions for it to heal, and then you have to let it do its work. The second wave I experienced in month 2 happened because I was consistent, not because I was aggressive. This experience made me question something else. If a formula with 8 ingredients can do this much, why not just get those ingredients from food? Why take a supplement at all? That question led me to run an experiment that I have not seen anyone else do. I tried to replace Sugar Defender with whole foods containing the same active compounds. And what I discovered about the difference between isolated ingredients and a properly formulated synergy changed the way I think about supplements entirely. Sugar Defender versus functional foods, the substitution test. After I had been using Sugar Defender for a couple of months, a question kept circling in my mind. If the formula is built on ingredients like Chromium, Gymnema Sylvestre, African mango, Maca root, and Eleuthero root, why not just eat the foods that contain these compounds? Why spend money on a supplement when you could get Chromium from broccoli, Gymnema from its native plant form, and adaptogens from herbal teas? It sounded logical, so I decided to test it. For 1 full week, I replaced the supplement with a carefully planned combination of whole foods and herbal preparations designed to deliver the same active compounds. I ate broccoli with almost every meal to get Chromium. I brewed Gymnema leaf tea twice a day. I added maca powder to my smoothies. I took Eleuthero tincture in the morning. I included African mango in the form of whole fruit extract capsules that I found at a health store. I matched the dosages as closely as I could to what was in the formula, and I tracked everything the same way I had been tracking with the supplement. The first 2 days, I felt fine. By day 3, I noticed the cravings creeping back. Not overwhelming, but present. By day 5, the afternoon crash returned. Not as severe as before I started, but enough that I noticed. By day 7, my sleep was lighter, and the joint stiffness I thought I had left behind was back. I was consuming the same active compounds, theoretically, but the results were not the same. And that is when I understood something critical about formulation. The way ingredients are extracted, combined, and dosed in a supplement like Sugar Defender is not the same as eating the whole foods. Chromium from broccoli is bound in fiber and plant cell walls. Your body has to work to release it, and the amount you actually absorb varies wildly based on what else you eat with it. In the supplement, Chromium is delivered in a specific chelated form designed for absorption. Gymnema Sylvestre in tea is a crude water extract. The concentration of the active compounds, the gymnemic acids, is unpredictable. In the formula, it is standardized to a consistent potency. The same goes for African mango. The whole fruit extract I used was not standardized for the specific compounds that influence metabolism. I was guessing, but the bigger issue was synergy. A well-formulated supplement does not just throw ingredients together. It balances them so that they work in concert. Eleuthero root supports adrenal function, which helps stabilize cortisol. Lower cortisol means less glucose release from the liver. Chromium helps insulin do its job more effectively. Gymnema reduces sugar absorption and calms sweetness perception. African mango supports lipid metabolism and gut health. When these are taken together in precise ratios, they create a cascade effect that no single food or tea can replicate. When I tried to piece them together on my own, I got bits and pieces of support, but not the coordinated action that made the difference. What I learned from this experiment is that functional foods are valuable, but they are not a substitute for a properly designed formula when your system is already out of balance. Eating broccoli is great. Drinking Gymnema tea is helpful. But if your metabolic signals are scrambled, you need a targeted, consistent, synergistic intervention to restore the communication. Once the system is back in balance, whole foods can help maintain it. But trying to use them to rebuild it is like trying to fix a broken engine by driving gently. The gentle driving is good maintenance, but it does not undo the damage. After this test, I understood why my earlier attempts to fix my energy and cravings with diet alone had failed. I was using the right foods, but I was not giving my body the concentrated, synergistic support it needed to break out of the loop. Sugar Defender gave me that support, and once I had it, I could finally see what was really driving my metabolic chaos all along. It was not just the food. It was something deeper, something I had been ignoring for years because I did not want to admit how much it controlled me. That realization led me to the next piece of the puzzle, and it changed how I view every failed attempt I made before this. The narrative of failure, how past experiences create skepticism, and why that is good. I need to tell you something that might sound strange. When I first heard about Sugar Defender, I did not believe it would work. In fact, I was almost certain it would be another disappointment. And that skepticism was not a weakness. It was the result of years of failed attempts, empty promises, and supplements that made grand claims but delivered nothing except expensive urine. I had tried berberine, which upset my stomach. I had tried Chromium alone, which did nothing noticeable. I had tried various glucose support blends that left me feeling exactly the same. Each failure added a layer of doubt. By the time I got to this formula, my default setting was cynicism. That cynicism turned out to be an advantage, because I was not looking for reasons to believe. I was looking for reasons to be proven wrong. I tested everything. I questioned every claim. I looked for the catch. And because I started from a place of skepticism, I did not fall for the hype. I let the results speak for themselves, slowly, over weeks, not days. What I realized is that most people who struggle with metabolic issues carry a long history of failure. You have tried the diets, the fasting protocols, the supplements that friends swore by. You have spent money, you have felt hopeful, and then you have felt the crash of disappointment when nothing changed. That history is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that you have been looking for solutions that treat symptoms instead of root causes. Sugar Defender was different for me because it did not try to suppress anything. It did not promise to melt fat while I slept. It did not claim to fix decades of metabolic chaos in a week. What it did was quieter. It restored communication. It smoothed the spikes. It cooled the inflammation. And because I was watching closely, I saw that the changes were not dramatic, but they were structural. They were happening at the foundation, not just the surface. My past failures taught me to recognize the difference between a product that masks a problem and one that actually addresses it. Masking feels fast. It gives you a quick hit of reassurance, but it fades just as quickly. Structural change feels slow. It feels like nothing is happening at first. Then one day you realize you have not thought about sugar in 3 days, or you slept through the night without waking up once, or you ate a meal that used to knock you out and you felt fine. That is when you know something real shifted. The skepticism I brought into this process made me patient. I did not expect miracles, so I did not quit when the first week passed without fireworks. I kept going because I was not chasing a feeling. I was testing a hypothesis, and that mindset made all the difference. If you are watching this and you have been burned before, do not let that discourage you. Let it sharpen you. Let it make you demand more evidence, more consistency, more proof. The right solution will hold up under that scrutiny. The wrong ones will crumble. What I discovered next was the missing link that connected all of my past failures into a single story. It had to do with something I had never considered, the role of adrenal fatigue and glucose instability. And once I understood this connection, everything I had tried before suddenly made sense. It was not that those approaches were wrong. It was that they were incomplete. The adrenal fatigue trigger, when glucose is just a symptom. Let me ask you something that nobody asked me for years. What is your stress level like? Not the kind of stress you casually mention when someone asks how you are doing. The real stress. The one that lives in your chest when you wake up at 3 in the morning. The one that makes you feel wired but exhausted at the same time. The one that has been there so long you stopped noticing it because it just became your normal. I did not connect that stress to my glucose problems. I thought they were separate. One was about food, the other was about life. But what I learned is that they are not separate at all. They are the same story. Your adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys, and they produce cortisol, your primary stress hormone. Cortisol has a job. It raises blood sugar to give you energy when you are in danger. That is a survival mechanism. In a healthy system, cortisol spikes when you need it and drops when the danger passes. But when you live in a state of chronic stress, when your mind is always racing, when you're always behind, when you're always worried, your cortisol stays elevated. And when cortisol stays elevated, your blood sugar stays elevated too. Your liver releases glucose because it thinks you are in constant danger. Your cells become less sensitive to insulin because your body is prioritizing survival over storage. The result is that your glucose instability is not just about what you eat. It is about how your body is reading your life. I did not understand this until I started using Sugar Defender and noticed something strange. In the first week, my glucose improved, but my sleep was still uneven. In the second week, something shifted. I woke up one morning and my mind was quiet. Not empty, but calm. The usual rush of anxious thoughts that greeted me before my feet hit the floor was softer. I did not attribute that to the supplement at first. I thought I was just having a good day. But then it kept happening. By the third week, I realized that the adaptogens in the formula, Eleuthero root and Maca root, were doing something I had not anticipated. They were supporting my adrenal function. Eleuthero root, sometimes called Siberian ginseng, is classified as an adaptogen. Adaptogens help your body modulate its stress response. They do not eliminate stress. They help your system return to balance after stress. When you take them consistently, your adrenal glands stop overproducing cortisol. The spikes become less intense. The baseline lowers. And when cortisol lowers, your liver stops dumping glucose unnecessarily. Your cells start responding to insulin again. The whole system calms down. Maca root works similarly. It supports the endocrine system, which includes the adrenals, and helps stabilize energy without overstimulation. What I realized is that my glucose instability was not the root problem. It was a symptom of a stressed-out adrenal system that had been running on high for years. The cravings, the crashes, the inflammation, all of it was downstream from a body that thought it was constantly under threat. Sugar Defender addressed the glucose directly through ingredients like Chromium and Gymnema, but it also addressed the stress indirectly through the adaptogens. That dual approach is why I saw changes that went beyond blood sugar. My mind got quieter. My sleep deepened. My reactions to daily stressors became less dramatic. I was not white-knuckling through my days anymore. This connection explains why so many people try diet after diet and feel like nothing sticks. You can eat perfectly, but if your adrenal system is in overdrive, your body will keep producing glucose, keep storing fat, and keep craving quick energy in the form of sugar. You are fighting a hormonal program that is stronger than any meal plan. The only way out is to calm the program itself. That is what the adaptogens in Sugar Defender helped me do. Once I understood this, everything I had tried before made sense. The fasting protocols that left me shaky were not failing because I lacked willpower. They were failing because my adrenals could not handle the stress. The low-carb diets that worked for a month and then stopped were not broken. They were being overridden by a cortisol response I had not addressed. The supplements I had tried that focused only on glucose ignored the driver behind it. Sugar Defender was the first thing I used that addressed both. Now, after seeing how the formula worked on my adrenals, my glucose, my inflammation, and my cravings, I started to look at the financial side of all this. Because I had spent so much money over the years on things that did not work. And when I added it up, what I found surprised me. The cost of instability was far higher than the cost of this supplement. And that realization changed how I viewed the investment entirely. The math of cost-benefit. What you really spend on metabolic instability. Let us do something uncomfortable. Let us talk about money. Not because I want to convince you of anything, but because I wish someone had walked me through this math years ago before I spent thousands of dollars on things that did not work. When I first looked at the price of Sugar Defender, I had the same reaction most people have. I thought it was expensive. I hesitated. I looked for cheaper alternatives. I told myself I could fix things with diet alone. But then I sat down and calculated what my metabolic instability was actually costing me, and the numbers stopped me cold. Start with the small purchases. The daily coffee shop stop where I would add a pastry or a sweetened drink because I was already crashing by mid-morning. That is $10 to $15 a week, sometimes more. Multiply that over a year, and you are looking at $500 to $800 just on emergency sugar fixes. Then add the vending machine snacks, the afternoon candy bars, the bags of cookies I would buy at the grocery store because I could not trust myself to not crave them later. Those impulse purchases added another $20 to $30 a week, another $1,000 a year. Now look at the bigger expenses. The meal delivery kits I signed up for because I thought if I had pre-portioned healthy food, I would finally get control. That was $300 a month for 6 months before I gave up. The gym memberships I barely used because I was too exhausted to go consistently. That was another $800 down the drain. The supplements I tried before, berberine, cinnamon extract, chromium picolinate, glucose support blends from various brands, none of which worked for more than a few weeks. I added up my supplement graveyard, and it totaled over $1,200 over 2 years. None of that money produced lasting results. Then there are the hidden costs. The lost productivity from afternoon crashes. The hours of brain fog where I was technically at my desk, but accomplishing nothing. If you bill by the hour or run your own business, that loss is real. For me, it was easily a few $100s a month in effective lost time. The medical appointments where I complained about fatigue and got told everything was normal, co-pays adding up with no solution. The medications I almost started for cholesterol and blood pressure before I decided to try one more approach naturally. Those prescriptions would have been a recurring cost for the rest of my life. When I added everything up, my metabolic instability was costing me between $300 and $500 a month. Every month. In impulse purchases, failed solutions, lost time, and health expenses. And what was I getting for that money? Nothing lasting. The cycle continued. The crashes kept coming. The cravings kept winning. The inflammation kept burning. Now let us look at Sugar Defender. The monthly cost is a fraction of what I was spending on the chaos. But more importantly, it is an investment in stopping the chaos, not just managing it. When I took the formula consistently for 2 months, I stopped buying the afternoon snacks. I stopped needing the coffee shop pick-me-ups. I stopped ordering takeout because I was too tired to cook. I stopped paying for supplements that did not work. The savings from those eliminated expenses more than covered the cost of the formula. And that is before I account for the value of having steady energy, clear focus, and the freedom to not think about food every hour of the day. I am not saying this to pressure anyone into a purchase. I am saying this because I spent years telling myself I could not afford a solution while I was bleeding money on the problem. The math does not lie. The cost of doing nothing is not zero. It is the cost of staying stuck in the cycle. And that cost adds up far faster than the price of a formula that actually addresses the root of the issue. After I did this math, I started looking at the company behind the product differently. I wanted to understand why their website did not scream at me with aggressive claims and flashy discounts. That lack of hype made me suspicious at first, but what I learned about their approach to marketing and formula protection turned my suspicion into something else entirely. It made me realize that sometimes the quietest brands are the ones with the most to lose if they get it wrong. The ghost formula, why the official website hides information, and why that might be good. I need to tell you about something that bothered me for weeks. When I first started researching Sugar Defender, I went to the official website and I felt like I was missing something. The site did not scream at me. There were no pop-ups counting down the seconds until a discount expired. There were no endless testimonials with photoshopped before and after pictures. In fact, the information felt almost too simple. I remember thinking, where's the hype? Where's the aggressive sales pitch? Every supplement I had ever tried before came with a funnel of urgency designed to make me click buy before I could think. This was different, and my skeptical brain immediately started looking for the catch. What I discovered over time is that the way a company presents its product tells you more about their strategy than their formula. Aggressive marketing is expensive. Those high-pressure funnels exist to recover massive advertising costs. The more you see a product being shoved in your face, the more of your money is going to the ad platform, not the ingredients. Sugar Defender takes a different approach. They rely on word of mouth, on reviews like this one, and on the simple reality that if the product works, people will talk. That is a quieter strategy, but it is also a more sustainable one. A company that has to shout to sell is usually a company that cannot rely on its results to do the talking. But there is another layer to this that I only understood after I looked deeper. The official website does not give away the full formula details in a way that competitors can easily copy. At first I thought that was frustrating. I wanted to see every ingredient, every milligram, every sourcing detail laid out for me. But then I thought about how the supplement industry works. Formulas that are fully transparent on the front page are often reverse engineered within weeks. Knockoffs appear on marketplaces with cheaper ingredients and zero quality control. The brands that protect their intellectual property are the ones that have something worth protecting. If a formula is just a random blend of cheap fillers, there is no reason to hide it. If a formula is built on carefully sourced, standardized extracts with proprietary ratios, keeping some of that information guarded is actually a sign of legitimacy. I reached out to their customer support with specific questions about sourcing and standardization. They did not give me a scripted response. They gave me detailed answers about where their Eleuthero root comes from, how their Gymnema Sylvestre is tested for gymnemic acid content, and why their Chromium is in a specific chelated form for absorption. That level of detail is not something a company with nothing to hide struggles to provide. The website itself is minimal, but the infrastructure behind it is not. They are not trying to convince you with flash. They are letting the product do the convincing. This changed my perspective. I realized that my suspicion of quiet brands came from being conditioned by noisy ones. I was so used to being shouted at that silence felt suspicious. But silence can also mean confidence. It can mean a company that does not need to trick you because they know that once you try it, you will see for yourself. That was my experience. I did not buy because of a slick sales page. I bought because I had seen enough scattered evidence from people who were not paid to say nice things. And after testing it myself, I understood why the website does not need to oversell. Now, after all of this, after the glucose control, the inflammation cooling, the adrenal support, and the financial clarity, I had one more experiment to run. I had been doing intermittent fasting on and off for years with mixed results. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes it left me shaky and irritable. I wanted to know how Sugar Defender would interact with fasting. Would it make the fast easier or harder? Would the two approaches work together or against each other? I tested several protocols, and what I found might change how you think about combining supplements with time-restricted eating. The intermittent fasting test, synergy or conflict? I have done intermittent fasting on and off for years. Sometimes it felt like the answer. Other times it left me shaky, irritable, and counting down the minutes until I could eat. I never understood why the same protocol would feel so different from one attempt to the next. When I started using Sugar Defender, I wondered how the two would interact. Would the supplement make fasting easier by stabilizing my glucose? Or would taking it on an empty stomach cause issues? I decided to test several different fasting windows to find out. I started with my usual 16-hour fast, eating between noon and 8 in the evening. In the past, this window worked okay, but the last 2 hours before breaking the fast were always a struggle. I would feel lightheaded, my focus would slip, and by 11:30, I was already planning my first meal. With Sugar Defender, I took my first dose around 10 in the morning, 2 hours before my eating window opened. What I noticed immediately was that the struggle in those final hours nearly disappeared. No lightheadedness, no counting minutes. I felt calm, focused, and the hunger that used to feel urgent became a background signal I could easily ignore. That was the first clue. The supplement was not just helping me handle glucose after meals. It was supporting my ability to go without food altogether. I looked at the ingredients to understand why. Eleuthero root and Maca root provide steady, non-stimulating energy that does not depend on food intake. They support adrenal function, which is critical during a fast when cortisol can sometimes spike and create that shaky, anxious feeling. Chromium helps maintain insulin sensitivity even in the absence of food, which means when you do eat, your body handles the glucose more effectively. Gymnema Sylvestre, taken during a fast, does not drop blood sugar dangerously because its primary mechanism is reducing absorption of sugar from the gut. If there is no sugar to absorb, it simply sits quietly. The combination created a fasting experience that felt sustainable instead of punishing. Encouraged by this, I tried a more aggressive window. I pushed to 18 hours of fasting with a 6-hour eating window. In the past, This would have left me foggy and irritable by the afternoon. With the supplement, I made it through with steady energy. I noticed that my mental clarity during the fasted state was actually better than when I was eating freely. That was new. The adaptogens were doing their work, keeping my stress response low while my body shifted into fat-burning mode. Then I tested the opposite. I tried taking the supplement during my eating window instead of during the fast. Same dose, same day, just timed differently. The effect was different, but still positive. When I took it with my first meal, I noticed the post-meal spike was even smaller than when I took it during the fast. That made sense because Gymnema and Chromium work directly on how your body processes the food you just ate. Taking it with the meal gave those ingredients immediate substrate to act upon. So I landed on a hybrid approach. On fasting days, I take the first dose mid-morning during the fasted state to support adrenal stability. On non-fasting days, I take it with my first meal to blunt the spike. Both work. It depends on your goals. I did run into one issue that I need to warn you about. When I tried a 24-hour fast, I took the supplement as usual around the 16-hour mark. By hour 20, I felt fine, but I noticed my energy was almost too steady. I was not hungry, but I also felt a bit disconnected from my body. I realized that pushing too long while using a formula that stabilizes everything so effectively might mask the natural signals that tell you when to eat. Fasting is a tool, not a test of endurance. So I stopped at 24 hours and did not push further. My takeaway is that Sugar Defender works beautifully with intermittent fasting, but it works best with reasonable windows. 16 to 18 hours felt optimal. Longer than that, and you risk overriding your body's natural communication, which is exactly what this formula is designed to restore. After all these experiments, after months of testing, measuring, and paying attention, I started to reflect on something bigger. Why did this video show up in your feed right now? Why does this information feel timely? There is a reason, and it has nothing to do with luck. The algorithm knows more about your metabolic struggles than you might realize, and the fact that you are here is not a coincidence. That realization became the next piece of this story. The echo in the algorithm. Why YouTube delivered this video to you now. I want to step back for a moment and look at something that has nothing to do with ingredients or dosing or absorption windows. I want to talk about why you are here. Not why you clicked on this video specifically, but why this topic, this information, this moment in time is landing in front of you right now. Because the truth is, the algorithm is not random. It is a mirror. And what it shows you reflects what you have been searching for, what you have been struggling with, what you have been trying to solve. Think about the past few months. How many times have you typed into a search bar some version of how to stop sugar cravings? Why am I always tired after eating? What is the best supplement for blood sugar? Why can I not lose weight even when I eat healthy? Those searches leave a trail. That trail tells a story. And that story is one of someone who has been trying, someone who has been frustrated, someone who has been told their numbers are normal while their body tells them something is wrong. The algorithm picks up on that story. It recognizes patterns. It sees when someone is cycling through the same problem without finding a solution. And when enough of those signals accumulate, it starts looking for content that offers a different angle, a deeper explanation, a piece of the puzzle that the surface level answers have been missing. That is why this video found you. Not because of luck, because your own search history, your own viewing patterns, your own quiet persistence in trying to figure out what is wrong with your energy, your cravings, your body, has been building a profile. And that profile matches a specific need. Not for another quick tip, not for another diet that will work for 2 weeks and then fail, but for a structural understanding of why this keeps happening and what actually addresses the root. I have been in your position. I watched video after video, read article after article, tried supplement after supplement. Each time, I was hoping that the next piece of information would be the one that made everything click. And each time, I got fragments. A tip about Chromium here, a study about Gymnema there, a mention of adaptogens in a completely different context. I had to piece it all together myself. This video exists because I wanted to assemble those pieces into one coherent picture so that someone else does not have to spend years doing what I did. The algorithm noticed that pattern in me too. It started showing me videos about adrenal fatigue after I had been searching about glucose. It showed me content about inflammation after I had been watching things about joint pain. It connected dots I did not even know were connected. That is what it is doing for you right now. You have been searching for answers about energy, about weight, about cravings, about that foggy feeling that will not lift. And the algorithm has been learning. It has been waiting for content that ties those threads together. This video is that content. I am not saying this to sound mystical. I am saying it because I want you to recognize that your presence here is not an accident. It is the result of your own persistence. You have been looking. You have been paying attention. You have not accepted the easy answers that told you everything was fine when it was not. That persistence is what got you to this point. And now that you are here, you have a choice to make. Not a pressured choice. Not a manipulated choice. A clear, informed choice about what you want to do with the information you now have. You have seen how metabolic silence works. You understand the invisible spikes that routine tests miss. You know about the dopamine loop that turns sugar into emotional currency. You have learned about the second wave of results that shows up after the first month. You understand absorption timing, the inflammation beneath the surface, the danger of taking too much, the limits of food alone, the value of skepticism, the adrenal connection, the real cost of instability, the quiet confidence of a company that does not need to scream, and how fasting and supplementation can work together. You have the full picture now, and that leads us to the only question that actually matters. The final question, if not now, when? An invitation to conscious decision. You have made it to the end of this video. That alone tells me something about you. You are not someone who schemes the surface. You are someone who wants to understand before you decide. You have sat through the science, the experiments, the mistakes, the corrections, the moments of clarity, and the hard truths about what metabolic instability really costs. You have seen what worked for me and what almost derailed me. You know the ingredients, the timing, the pitfalls, and the potential. And now there is only one thing left to consider. Not whether this works. Not whether the price is fair. Not whether the company is legitimate. Those questions have been answered. The only question left is this. If not now, when? I spent years waiting for the right moment to fix my energy, my cravings, my health. I told myself I would start on Monday. I told myself after the holidays. I told myself when work calmed down. I told myself when I had more money. The right moment never came, because the right moment is not something that arrives. It is something you create. And every day I waited was another day of afternoon crashes, another day of guilt after sugar, another day of brain fog that I pretended was normal. Waiting did not protect me. It cost me. It cost me time, money, energy, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your body is working with you instead of against you. I am not here to pressure you into buying anything. That is not how I operate. This channel is called Truth or Toxic for a reason. I tell you what I find, good or bad, and I let you decide. What I found with Sugar Defender is that it addressed the root of my metabolic chaos in a way that nothing else did. It restored communication. It smoothed the spikes. It cooled the inflammation. It supported my adrenals. It broke the dopamine loop. And it did all of that without hype, without gimmicks, without demanding that I believe anything before I saw the proof. But here's what I also know. Information without action is just entertainment. You can watch this video, nod along, feel like you learned something, and then close the tab and go back to the same patterns that brought you here in the first place. I have done that hundreds of times. I know how easy it is. The comfort of the familiar, even when it hurts, is a powerful force. Staying stuck is easier than changing, but staying stuck also has a cost. You know what that cost feels like. You live with it every day. If you decide that this is the moment, the one where you finally give yourself the support you have been looking for, I have left the link to the official website in the description below. That is the only place I recommend buying from. Not because I get some special kickback, but because the market is full of counterfeits that look like the real thing but contain cheap fillers, incorrect doses, and in some cases, ingredients that are not even on the label. The official site guarantees authenticity, quality control, and customer support. That matters. You do not want to go through what I went through in the first month when I nearly sabotaged my own results with bad timing and bad combinations. You want the real formula, the one that actually contains the standardized Eleuthero root, the Gymnema Sylvestre with verified gymnemic acid content, the chelated chromium, the African mango extract, the Maca root, and the other ingredients that work together to restore your metabolic communication. If you are still unsure, I understand. Skepticism is healthy. It protected me for years from wasting money on things that did not work. But let that skepticism be what pushes you to test for yourself, not what holds you in place. Order 1 bottle. Use it consistently for at least 30 days. Follow the timing guidelines I shared. Separate it from coffee and tea. Pay attention to how you feel, not just in the first week, but in the second wave. And then decide for yourself. That is what I did. That is why I am here telling you this story. You have the information now. You have the context. You have the warnings and the insights that I had to learn the hard way. The only thing left is the decision, the one you have been putting off, the one that lives in the space between knowing what to do and actually doing it. If not now, when? If not this, what? You have been searching for answers. They are right here. What you do with them is up to you. I will be in the comments if you have questions. I read them. I respond. If you have tried Sugar Defender, share your experience. If you are about to start, let me know what day you began. I will be watching for your stories. And if you are still waiting for the right moment, ask yourself what you are waiting for. The right moment is already here. It has been waiting for you to recognize it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying until the end. I will see you in the next video.